Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about how my reading year is going so far. It's approaching the end of March when I'm filming this. I just feel like it's the perfect time to just talk about some of the books that I have read recently and just share some of my thoughts, but also just look at some of the stats. At the time of filming this I have read 17 books so far this year. However, in this screenshot that I'm going to show you it shows 16 books, and I wanted to take just a little screenshot before I rated the book that was my 17th book because I ended up giving that 2 stars, but I just liked what my average rating was, and I was just like, oh, I'm so impressed. Like, usually my average rating at this point in the year is a lot lower, so I was really pleased to see that. Up until this kind of book that I read most recently, everything had gotten 3 stars or above so far, so I've just really felt that I've had a really nice reading year, because sometimes it starts off and it's like 2 stars, 1 star, and I'm like, oh my god. So yeah, I've read 17 books so far this year, and if you watch my previous video where I was talking about some proofs and some arcs that I had been sent, not a lot of them obviously, because there's only like 5 of them, but the majority of the proofs that I spoke about in that video I have read. I've got 1 more to read, and that's a book that I'm currently reading at the moment, so I'm on track with that goal that I set myself, and I'm really happy about that, because the next goal after that is to start reading some of the books from my TBR stack, that physical stack that's just been sitting there, and I would like to get rid of those as well. And I still need to make a start on these library books as well, and I've got another one in the library, The Correspondent, coming. I'm really excited to read, so there is a lot of books to read. I'm also really excited for my non-fiction reads. Last year I kind of just really fell out of reading non-fiction and just finding non-fiction books that I'm excited about, but there are several non-fiction books I'm really excited to read, so I'm going to do another video talking about some ones that I'm either currently reading or really excited to get to. But yeah, back to business. So yeah, average rating of 3.5 stars so far, and like I said, I have read 17 books so far this year. The month where I read the most books was February, and I ended up reading 8 books. And then in January, I believe I read 4 books, and so far in March, I have read 5 books. I think, yeah, I'll probably end up on 7 maybe by the end of March. In terms of what that split has been like in terms of fiction versus non-fiction, I have read 15 fiction books and then 2 non-fiction books. And then in terms of that split, in terms of the format, I have read 12 books, 12 physical books, 1 ebook. I'm trying to think what that book might have been, actually. And then 4 audiobooks so far this year. And then already so far this year, I have managed to read 2 books from the same author. One of them is literally the exact same book, but just in a different format. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I read that in the kind of not original paperback, but paperback version, and then also an annotated version, which is very cool. And then also 2 books from Richard Osman. One was a read though, so yeah. So I'm obviously not going to talk about all of the books, but I'll throw in some honourable mentions and stuff like that. But there's 1 book so far this year that has gotten 5 stars, and that is Wild Dark Shore. I love this book so much so that this book actually I was crying at the end of this book and reading this book. I was also going through something a little bit painful at the time as well, but the book was just so vast, and I loved how she talked about nature and water and just what a force it was. So the premise of this book is a woman kind of washes up ashore on this island, and this island is inhabited by a family. So it is a father and his 3 kids. He has a daughter, a son, an older son. The daughter is, I believe, the middle child, and then a younger son. The mother has passed away, and they are on this island because of some sort of some sort of project to protect kind of the seeds of trees, plants, and food and things like that. I forget what's kind of happening in the bigger kind of landscape of the kind of world that they're living in. But yeah, they have been tasked with that. There are other researchers on the island, and yeah, as you kind of read through the story, you kind of slowly find out what is actually happening. But what is so beautiful about this is the nature writing and just the vastness of just life, relationships, and how we actually relate to each other. One of the themes that is really present in this book, also, yeah, one of the things that's really present in this book is about kind of raising your kids away from the rest of society, because obviously the kids don't have any other interaction with other people, but also about that return to society, and they keep, in some ways it feels like the return to life, and how are they actually going to blend in and mesh well with other people, considering that they've actually had quite a long time away from children their age, the kind of worries that kids their age might have. They've not had to have any of that. And alongside that, it's the grief of their dad as well. That's a theme that's really prominent in this as well, just grieving his past his ex-wife. And then there is obviously the mystery of who this woman is and how does she actually get like this far to the island, and like why didn't she like die or anything like that. So when they find her, she's unconscious, and it's like the family kind of like tend to her, and they're tending to her. They also have like very like limited supplies in terms of like food and just like actual care for like if someone is injured. So there is a lot of the talk of like the different chores that they have to do, the upkeep that they have to do, because they can't really afford to slack, because if they do, it could mean that like if there is really bad weather, there's actually severe consequences for them. So anyway, they're nursing this woman, but they're also just a bit like, why is she here? And there's a whole bit of like suspicion in terms of like maybe some stuff that has happened on the island like during their time. So as the story unravels, you are also finding that out as well, and also finding out like why this woman is here and what she is doing there. I won't spoil all of that, but I think what's so beautiful about this book is the writing. It is about like that, the different like levels of grief, of nature, like just the way that things change in cycles, but how forceful like nature can be. And in this, it's really interesting that this is set on an island, because Rowan, the woman who washes up ashore, her kind of backstory is to do with fire and how that kind of like takes everything away. And then here on the island, we're dealing with water and what a huge force it is and what a brutal force it can be. And again, how that can also take everything away. Such a stunning book. Like, I absolutely loved it. And I feel like really fortunate to have read it so early in the year and have it as just a really like standout piece. Absolutely, highly recommend. Especially as someone that doesn't read a lot of books that are to do with like nature. I thought her writing was fantastic. That I'm just like, oh, I definitely want to read more like books if they talk about like just the life and nature in this way, because I thought this was absolutely stunning. So highly recommend. So then I'll dive into the two books that I gave 4 stars. So the first two, like I said, the same book. So The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I used to say Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but when I was reading this annotated version, it's actually pronounced Jekyll. And I feel like I have heard a couple of people say that, maybe more so when I've been in like Scotland, because they probably know how to actually pronounce it. But I ended up reading this because Deborah mentioned it like last year when she said she was reading it for kind of like October month. And I was like, oh God, I haven't read that book in years. Like, it was something that we read when we were at school. But I feel like it's just one of those books that like just transcends time. Like, it's such a good book. And I even think like even when you're reading it at school, the kind of thoughts of what Mr. Hyde could be are just like, it's vast. And I think it's still vast when you're like an adult, of like what that other side of someone or yourself can look like. So yeah, I really want to read it because I remember enjoying it so much. And you look at it from a critical lens when you're at school, and like analysis, or you analyze it a lot when you're at school. And I really liked that part of it actually. But I thought I just want to kind of like read it now, like as an adult. And then I was like, I'm sure there are probably like graphic novel versions of it and stuff like that. So when I did a little search in my library, I found this annotated version, and this version was brilliant. It was like in a big hardback, and it talked about the film adaptations, any sort of plays. It gave a whole history of Robert Louis Stevenson's like life, and I always forget that he wrote Treasure Island as well. So it's just and just kind of where he ended up in life, but also it talks about the plays, like any kind of movie posters, any kind of like artist that did illustrations of the play. Absolutely brilliant. So like if you're someone who's like actually really into this, that's a really good book to get, because I feel like it fills in a lot of the kind of historical context for the book as well. And as you kind of go through, they have things in the margins just telling you about like different parts of what this might be referencing and things like that. And then they also have a version where it's like his actual original notes on the manuscripts, and you can see the bits where he's crossed out bits of the story and actually what made the final cut. So it is really fascinating. I read that bit first, and then I went on to read like the actual paperback version without any annotations, just so I could fully submerge myself in the story. But yeah, I gave it a solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was just as enjoyable as I remember it being, and just as like kind of creepy in some ways as I imagine it being, but just like so much is left to interpretation of what Hyde is up to. You obviously some like manifestations of what that is in terms of like in the plot, but a lot of it happens off page, and it's just left to you as the reader to kind of imagine what kind of things he might be getting up to. And that's why I think it's fascinating that as a teenager, like you'll have a sense of maybe like what is kind of depravity and like what things he could be doing. But then yeah, as you get older, you kind of think about the world that it was written in, the time period it was written in, and just thinking about like what he might also be alluding to. And there was stuff in the book that I didn't get when I was a teenager that I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get that now. So yeah, I just thought, yeah, it's just such a brilliant piece of work. Like, and I just think it really just is something that I feel like everyone can relate to, having that kind of forward-facing self that you show the world, and then the side of you that you think is just like, no, this is not something I can show someone. Obviously, as someone who does a lot of like kind of shadow work, it kind of you liken it to that as well. But yeah, I think it's just such a unique piece of work, and just something, like I said in the beginning, that really transcends time. So thoroughly enjoyed that. The other book that I gave 4 stars was a book that I actually got recommended on TikTok. um, Usually when people are recommending books on TikTok, I'm like, yeah, I read that book, or I don't want to read that book. But this one I'd never heard of, and I was like, okay. So I just thought, I searched it up, and it was on Spotify. It's 2 hours long, and I was like, yeah, I can get into that. And it's called Attraction Intelligence, written by Jessica Wrigley. Really thoroughly enjoyed this. As someone who has literally just been going through something where I'm just like, I don't even understand like what happened here. I thought this was a really interesting piece about, I guess I'm not someone that's like very well versed in attachment theory and all this sort of stuff. I know vaguely like what it is, but deeply no. But this really helps me to understand, like, kind of, even if consciously we don't think we are choosing something, like we think, oh no, I'm doing different from like what my parents did, or like what I did like 2 years ago, or stuff like that. It really like brought home to me, like, that feeling inside your body is usually what's overriding like what you logically think. So what feels like home to you is usually what you're kind of gonna go towards, what it feels familiar. And even though you're just like, maybe that doesn't ring true, I think actually for a lot of people, we don't realize that, yeah, a lot of the time we are choosing things that feel familiar to us, even if logically we know that's not good for us or what we want. And yeah, so she just talks a lot about like that kind of theory, in terms of attachment styles and things like that. But I think really just kind of breaks it down. I wouldn't even say in a more accessible way, because from what I've heard of Attached, I've never read it, it is quite accessible. But what I like a lot of the times, and I say this about different things, is sometimes you just need to hear things from different sources before it really clicks. And for me, this was one of the first times like that kind of saying, people were saying like, you choose what is familiar to you, really clicked for me, because I was just like, oh yeah, if it's really kind of held in the body, if it's a whole somatic thing, like, it's very hard to override that feeling, because when you are in something that perhaps feels like safe or doesn't feel like what you are used to, it can feel like maybe this is the wrong thing, rather than like you just realizing that maybe this is the thing, the right thing, but my body is just like not used to it. So that's what made me realize, like, actually that's a really hard thing to overcome. So I really enjoyed this. And then like the second half, it's split into kind of 2 halves, where she's kind of talking about the kind of theory of these things, but then the second half she gives like really kind of practical tips. So yeah, I found that to be really interesting. I really enjoyed it. And then another book I gave 4 stars, and this is a book I finished like very early on in the year. It might have actually been the first book that I read, that I finished this year, and that is The Merge by Grace Walker. I really enjoyed this. Oh, it was like very dystopian, very scary actually, and I'm just like, would not surprise me if in like 100 years like we have this, because it is just one of those books where you're just like, no, I could definitely see this happening. This book is set in a time like, I don't know what year and how far in the future it is, but it is essentially about the fact that like we have overpopulated the earth. So now, like, eventually, like, it's just like now where you see things get pushed through legislation, you think that would never happen, and it's just like you slowly see their world try to like move towards this. In order to combat the overpopulation and the fact that like there are too many people using all the resources in the world, they now start like basically merging people. It's just like so insane, but I'm like, I can also see this definitely happening at some point. So you essentially get like 2 people in one body. And now the framing of this is quite interesting, because for some people it can seem like, oh, if you really love your partner so much, why would you just not want to like merge them and you guys can exist in one body, and how great would that be? And also, hey, it's actually really beneficial for the planet. So in this story, we're dealing with a woman named Laurie, and she wants to merge with her mother. Her mother has Alzheimer's, and she wants to basically keep her mother from deteriorating, but still keep her around. And that's one of the ways she can do it. So she enters into the program, and you get perspective from Laurie and her mum. Her mum, obviously, because she is dealing with Alzheimer's, she writes things a lot of the time down in her journal, and then she comes back to it, and you're getting the kind of confusion that she feels, where she's like, did I already know this? Like, have I forgotten this? Blah 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 blah. And then you're getting the perspective from Laurie, where they're going through like this process, and obviously you're dealing with like the different counselors and the other people that they encounter who are going through this process as well. So I believe in their group there is a daughter and a father. The daughter is suffering with addiction issues, so that is why they're trying to like merge to kind of maybe save the daughter. There is a couple who is pregnant, and I believe now that that's just not a thing that happens now in the society. People don't just like start having babies like that. So they're kind of one of the first people to merge while an individual is pregnant. I can't remember who the other people were, but yeah, you're basically going through them in this process and how they prepare you for this merge. And a lot of it is done through each individual talking about their memories, so that when they merge you together, you will have both people in their memories, and then eventually, like, you both get used to the fact that these are the memories that you share. And it's really, really fascinating. Obviously, you can think of what would be weird about merging with your mum when your mum starts to talk about having sex with your dad, and you're just like, I probably don't want to know that. Like, like it's one of the things where you're just like, did you really think this through? Obviously, just other things about like your mum's life that you might not have known, other things about your life that your mum might not have known. You're having to like dictate all of that so that the process is as simple as possible. So that is the main bulk of the story. However, I guess as you read on, what you come to realize is actually happening is far more just like shocking and just deeply sad. And again, doesn't surprise me. I'm like, if it goes this way, if this truly is something that could like happen, it actually doesn't surprise me that the outcome that we got is the outcome that we got, because I feel like, yeah, no, it's a freaking ridiculous idea. But I don't want to spoil it. But I thought it was a really, really interesting and just a very thought-provoking book. But also, it really does bring up the idea of like, for some people, they're just like, we're so in love with each other, we want to be one. Like, and that to me is incredibly bizarre. I'm not one of those people. But there are people who think like that, and I think for some people, the prospect of that is amazing. But for me, the prospect of that would be incredibly shocking. That robbing yourself of that ability of like your own autonomy would not make any sense to me. But it's really interesting how for some people that still makes sense. But then what happens also in this society is people who make the decision not to do that are basically seen as like lower class citizens, so they don't get the priorities that other people do. And you say priorities, you're just talking about basic needs, access to basic needs. So unless you're willing to join into this, like, there is just a lot of things you don't have access to in life, just like regular kind of groceries, access to like housing and things like that. You're very much deprioritized. So it's very interesting to see like it's essentially a manipulation tactic to get you to join this program. I thought it was just incredibly, incredibly fascinating, and I loved it. And so I also rated 6 books 3.5 stars. One of them was, this is what I love about Storygraph, that I can just do 3.5 star rating. So one of them was The Impossible Fortune, Richard Osman. For me, these books have always been the 3.5 stars. I really just enjoy them for like the musings on life and just like the different comments from Joyce in the book and just all the different things the characters get up to. Half the time, like, I'm forgetting like to join up the dots with the mystery, I'm not going to lie. And also when I was reading this book, I was really aware that like I'd forgotten what happened in any of the other books. Like when I think of the actual mystery and the actual like plot points of the mystery, absolutely no idea. But do I enjoy their like interactions with each other and the way they talk about like, they're not really like back in my day, but just the way they talk about like life now and just like, oh well, when I was doing this wasn't like that. I just enjoy those musings so much. When I re-listened to one of the books via audio, I was really aware that actually a lot of the book could probably be a lot shorter because there was just so many of the musings. But it's not annoying to me. But I just remember thinking, actually, I didn't notice this when I was reading it, but listening to it, I was a bit like, there is a lot of meandering here. Thoroughly enjoyable, though. I did really enjoy. I liked The Impossible Fortune. And then the other book that I read is Womb, the story of where we all began. I did like this. It took me just a while to like go through it. It was a bit of a slog for me. I don't know why. But yeah, I spoke about it in my proof video where I just kind of broke down the different contents pages, different chapters it's broken into. It is really, really, really fascinating, and it's nice to kind of see the kind of developments in women's health across just like so many different things, but everything tied to the womb. Another book that I read, this was the book that I read as an ebook, was Piranesi, I think I'm going to say. Heard so much about this and I was like, yeah, I definitely like want to read it. I did enjoy it, but yeah, I thought it was like weird and wonderful, so that's why I got 3.5 stars. And then The X's, this is one of the books that I talked about in my proof video. I think I just finished it at that point, and that got 3.5. And then Good Loving, another book that I spoke about in my proof video. Again, enjoyed it. And then another book that I listened to it by audio, is A House for Miss Pauline. I thought this was wonderful, and it's one of those books that I know, had I read the physical copy, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much. I really enjoyed the audiobook version because the author did the kind of Caribbean accent. I can sometimes hear when it dropped a little bit. I think they're more used to doing like an American accent. But yeah, I felt like that really, really added to it. It reminds me a little bit of My Sister the Serial Killer, where I don't think, again, I would have enjoyed the book so much if I hadn't listened to it via audio, because when you listen to it in the different accents and tones, like, I just feel like Caribbean people, Nigerian people, like, there's just so much intonation and things that it just sounds so much funnier than like it would do if you were just reading it and had never heard people from that part of the world talk. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed the audiobook version. And as a story, I really enjoyed it as well. There were 5 books that I rated 3 stars. Another audiobook called The Anatomy of an Alibi, Murder on the Hotel Orient, which I spoke about in my proof video. Manual for Good Wives, and the Thursday Murder Club, the first one, which I re-listened to, and then the Tea Master and the Detective. That was actually, this book was actually interesting because I read this book years ago, and then I've always wanted to reread it, so somehow I just decided to reread it this year. And I actually gave it 4 stars when I originally read it, but I dropped it down to 3 stars. When I first read it, I remember I loved it. I was obsessed. It's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes, but set in like space using ships. And this time I reread it, and I was like, I still do like it. I still do think it's clever, but not as much as I enjoyed it last time. So yeah, but yeah, that is how my reading year has been going so far. I've really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, I'm really excited for some of my non-fiction reads that I'm going to read. And yeah, my fiction books, I'm just always super excited for all the different ones that I'm going to read. But how has your reading year been going so far? Let me know of any favourites that you have had that you think I might like, because yeah, I definitely want to check them out. And thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in another one. Bye.